We start the bulletin with some breaking news coming in. Another super sensational expose. After Times now had accessed Sandeep Singh's call record data or CDRs. The CDR shows he was in touch with the Mumbai police investigating officer of the IO the day after Sushant's death. 2 calls were made to Bhushan Belnekar, the man who was in charge of the investigation, not just the ambulance driver. We now know that Sandeep Singh contacted the investigating officer after Sushant's death. The question again, and this question keeps coming up again and again, is why? Pranesh, Arunil and Tamal join us. Pranesh, coming to you first on this. He was not only in touch with the ambulance driver, who, by the way, has denied knowing him. Now we know the IO was also in touch with him. He called him twice.
You know, Athar, before the break, I promised our viewers that the next news break will be jaw-dropping. The reason I said it was jaw-dropping because of the disclosure which is lined up. Bhushan Belnekar features on the call data records of Sandeep Singh. Who is Bhushan Belnekar? Bhushan Belnekar is the investigating officer. Look at the date, June 15, day after Sushant Singh was found dead. Bhushan Belnekar and Sandeep Singh exchanged calls. Why did Sandeep Singh call Bhushan Belnekar? That is question number 1. And there were 2 calls. Lasted 90 seconds. But the name is important and so is the date. On June 15th, the day after Sushant was found dead in his Bandra apartment, Sandeep Singh, who was not in touch with Sushant Singh Rajput all throughout, at least for the last 10 months, calls Bhushan Belnekar, who is also the investigating officer in this case. Now, is this some coincidence? We don't know, because going through the call data records, there are many such instances, and Times Now is highlighting them one by one. We were the first channel to tell you about the June 16 call from Sandeep Singh to the ambulance driver, and that is strange because on the 15th of June, the cremation had taken place. So why was Sandeep Singh still talking to the driver? And this, I'm really at a loss of word here. Why would Sandeep be talking to Bhushan Belnekar, who was the investigating officer? And the narrative then, Athar, if you recollect, the Maharashtra Home Minister was very quick to dismiss the case by saying that this is a case of suicide. If the Home Minister had then called it suicide, why was Sandeep Singh still talking to the investigating officer? What were these 2 calls about? So the Mumbai police must clarify, and Sandeep Singh should come out clean, because clearly he is hiding something.
So there you go. So many unanswered questions. Not only Sandeep Singh, but the Mumbai police also now in the dock. Why don't they come forward and say what was the IO doing speaking to Sandeep Singh just a day after Sushant was found dead? Stay with us. Pranesh, Arunil and Tamal also on the program. Very quickly to you, Tamal. This particular CDR record, the call data record that we've accessed, showed 2 things and throw up many questions. Why was he talking to the ambulance driver when the ambulance driver has confirmed at Times Now he doesn't know who Sandeep is? Then the IO is in touch with the same guy. He's called him twice, not once but twice. The Mumbai police needs to clarify what exactly was the IO doing speaking to Sandeep Singh.
Well, Arthur, the most important part is if he claims that he comes from the same part of India from where Sushant Singh Rajput also came, if he claims that he knew Sushant Singh Rajput very well, one of the closest associates, then it's quite expected that he would also be known to the family. Then the question that begs an answer, while he had shown so much of alacrity in coordinating with the ambulance driver, in trying to perform the last rites, now that CDR also confirms that he was trying to get in touch with Mumbai police officers, investigating officers precisely, whether he was asked to do all this by the family. The answer is a big no. The family has never claimed that they authorized Sandeep Singh to act on their behalf, be more helpful, be a messiah to the family and do all the coordination work. So Sandeep Singh, after having not stayed in touch for almost a year, all of a sudden pops up, gets all the limelight, becomes the center of all attention, makes all tall claims, and then all of a sudden goes into radio silence. So there are several questions before Sandeep Singh. There is a section of people who are demanding that he should be questioned by CBI, and CBI, and as of now, it is pretty much evident CBI is not letting go anyone. If somebody has made some claim, they are trying to verify, re-verify all the statements from the horse's mouth. So to dismiss that Sandeep Singh will...
Tamal, bear with me for a second as Bhavtosh Singh also joins the broadcast. Pranesh, let me come back to you quickly first. These revelations also now make it completely important that the CBI investigate and dig further as to why the IO was in touch with Sandeep Singh, and also why was he calling the ambulance driver when the ambulance driver has clearly said he doesn't know who the man is. He doesn't know him from Adam.
And also that if on June 15 the cremation had taken place, what business did Sandeep Singh have to discuss with the ambulance driver? But let's focus on this. Bhushan Belnekar, the investigating officer in this case, got a call from Sandeep Singh on June 15. This is a day after Sushant Singh Rajput was found dead. And look at this. 2 calls lasted a good 90 seconds, over a minute clearly. And I'm saying this is suspicious because Athar, the neighbor of Sushant Singh Rajput, who came out and spoke to Times Now and said something somewhere, her words, not mine. And she said there was something suspicious because on June 13th, the lights were switched off earlier than before. And the neighbor wasn't questioned by the Mumbai police, but the Mumbai police investigating officer, Mr. Belnekar, Bhushan Belnekar, was in touch with Sushant's friend, a friend who was not in touch with Sushant for the last 10 months. So this is strange. It doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up, Athar, because look at this 521 entry on the 521st entry on the call data records of Sandeep Singh. June 15th, a call goes to Bhushan Belnekar, the man investigating the case, and this is a day after the death. 2 calls. We need clear answers. Sandeep Singh, Mumbai police, both of them, they need to now come out and tell us what was this call about.
We also have Vikram Singh, former DGP of Uttar Pradesh, former IPS officer, joining us on the phone line right now. Dr. Singh, we've of course also highlighted earlier how Riya Chakrabarti was in touch with the investigating officer, not just the investigating officer, but also a DCP in charge of the entire investigation. That was irregularity number 1. Now it comes to light, Dr. Singh, that the IO got a call from Sandeep Singh, this individual who claims to be Sushant's friend, didn't speak to him for a year, but suddenly turns up after Sushant dies. Now, he has not been vetted, if I can use that word, by the family. The CBI needs to look into this. The Mumbai police needs to answer.
Obviously, it was not that he came down straight from the heavens, and it is extremely surprising, unnatural and unusual for a person who was not there for the last 12 months suddenly becomes the master of ceremonies and chief of protocol and conducting the entire operations there itself and being in constant touch with the investigator is something that the Mumbai police and the investigator will have to explain in detail what were the circumstances that you parachuted Sandeep Singh to the scene of occurrence and made him do everything beginning from the keeping the ambulance in position, taking the dead body and...
Dr. Singh, apologies for interrupting you. The fact that he is not answering Times Now's questions, refusing to meet us, doesn't that also make it incumbent now on the investigating authority, which is the CBI right now, to dig further into this and summon this man and ask him some tough questions?
You are such a seasoned news person, and you would know that anybody under these circumstances who goes underground is a highly suspicious an act. And the very fact that he has so much to conceal, he thinks that it would be suicidal on his part to come before you or to come before Times Now. And therefore, he is trying to cover himself up and erase his footsteps from the scene of occurrence. And he is on a short rope. He does not have very long to go. What you have exposed just now, the investigation will get over and investigation will get after him and understand what were the circumstances. This is just one of the few calls that you'll be able to uncover. There'll be many, many more surprises coming.
There you go. Dr. Vikram Singh confirming our suspicions. It's very, very irregular that this man refuses to speak to Times Now. He's on a short rope. Dr. Vikram Singh, thank you for joining us. Bhavtosh also on the broadcast. Bhavtosh, like we've discussed this before, these calls going into police officers, in this particular case, Mr. Belnekar, who was the IO, the investigating officer in the case, he got 2 calls from this individual, Sandeep Singh. Now this individual refuses to come out and answer the most basic questions here. The CBI will have to investigate why the Mumbai police thought it wasn't prudent enough or important enough to dig further into this.
Well, the CBI has already called the investigating officers, but Mumbai police have claimed that because of COVID outbreak at Bandra police station, many of those officers who CBI wants to examine, cannot join the probe at the DRDO guest house, which is the camp office of CBI SIT New Delhi. But the question that needs to be answered by Sandeep Singh is why he called the ambulance driver on 16th when the body was already cremated on 15th. More importantly, why was he in touch with the investigating officer when the probe had just started? He was someone who was not summoned at that point of time. His statement was not required at that point of time. And why was this hurry to show as a close friend of Sushant Singh Rajput? He was the person who was directly dealing with the media. And then the fact, more important fact, as Tamal was saying, that for nearly 10 months he was not in touch with Sushant Singh Rajput. Why he entered the picture in the first place, why he started owning up the responsibility of being a close family friend so he would help Sushant's family. In fact, Athar, 2 days back, Siddhant had interviewed one of the persons who had taken Rehat to the mortuary, and he in fact said that Sandeep Singh got a call from Dubai. Now, there are reports that ED had said that Reha was in touch or was dealing with narcotics and had written this to CBI. So clearly there is something amiss in this case. All the key players in this case are not telling the truth, and CBI has said that at appropriate time they will examine Sandeep Singh. He is someone who entered the house after the body was discovered. He was not there on the night of 13th and 14th, and they would like to ask him why he pretended to be a friend when Sushant Singh Rajput was not in touch with him for nearly 10 months.
There you go, the protagonists of the dramatis personae, I don't know if that's the right term here, one after the other, more murky details coming out right now. Hitherto unknown, Times Now has been bringing those details to you, including the fact that Sandeep Singh called the ambulance driver a full 2 days after Sushant was found dead. What was the need to call him after the body had already been cremated? Also add to that, ladies and gentlemen, the driver has confessed to Times Now, on Times Now, he spoke to my colleague Kajal, that he doesn't know who this Sandeep Singh is. Now, if that's not suspicious, we don't know what is. Another sensational